Hi, I'm Bakhtar Sanova and welcome to A News. Let's see the top stories. Iran and the United States begin historic talks in Rome amid nuclear tensions and high stakes. US President Donald Trump considers halting peace talks if Russia or Ukraine make deal too difficult. Washington and Kiev sign memorandum of intent to jointly exploit Ukraine's mineral resources. Iran and the United States have started talks in Rome to reduce tensions over Tehran's nuclear program. Mediated by Oman, this meeting is considered the most serious diplomatic test since 1979. Amid ongoing wars and tensions in the Middle East, this meeting could be a turning point for the world.
Iran and the United States have started the second round of talks in Rome regarding Tehran's nuclear program. The meeting, mediated by Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, involved discussions between former US Ambassador to the Middle East Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The outcome of these talks will determine whether the parties reach an agreement. Before the meeting, Witkoff proposed reducing Iran's uranium enrichment to 3.67% and halting all enrichment. However, Iranian officials stated they would not accept the Libya model and would not support enriching uranium abroad.
First round of talks was fairly predictable, but this second round is a lot more complex, especially because of some of the utterances that were made by the various parties.
This dialogue between Iran and the United States is considered a historic step after the long-standing tensions since 1979. In 2018, US President Donald Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, violating the agreement to halt Iran's uranium enrichment and lift sanctions. Since then, negotiations between the parties have failed to produce results.
Chances of reaching an agreement, because both sides want to reach an agreement, is more than not wanting to reach an agreement. But there are serious issues over which compromise has to come about. And there's not much ground that the Iranians have except for saying that, look, we want some kind of an enrichment program. We don't want to, they can't lose face. And on the other hand, President Trump has to be able to tell the domestic audience in his own country, first and foremost, that I have been able to attain an agreement that is more favorable to the United States.
The current talks coincide with rising tensions in the Middle East. The war between Israel and Hamas, along with US airstrikes against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, has resulted in over 70 deaths and many injuries. On Friday, Donald Trump stated, "I simply want to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. I want Iran to be strong and developed."
But I think if these negotiations fall apart, then there will be military strikes against Iranian nuclear sites and possibly some other infrastructure on Iran, on Iranian soil, water, electricity, oil facilities, things of those natures, which the Iranian economy seriously cannot afford to have.
In Rome, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff will negotiate indirectly through an Omani official who will shuttle messages between the two sides, Iranian officials said, a week after a first round of indirect talks in Muscat that both sides described as constructive.
Iran marked its annual Army Day on Friday with a large-scale parade in Tehran showing off missiles, drones and military vehicles. It came just a day before nuclear talks with the United States kick off in Rome. President Masoud Pezeshkian attended the event, praising the country's armed forces. State television reported that domestically developed drones, including jet-powered models, were shown in the parade in Tehran. In addition to the capital, military parades were staged in other major cities across the country. The second round of Iran nuclear talks come amid escalating regional tensions and growing global pressure on both parties to reach a diplomatic resolution. To break this down and analyze the potential outcomes, I'm joined by Tom Grass, political analyst, who is joining us from Tel Aviv. Mr. Grass, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Gross, how are these latest talks being viewed in Israel, particularly in light of its long-standing opposition to Iran's nuclear program?
Well, there's a lot of concern because there's a feeling that once again the Islamic regime in Iran is just playing for time. They'll out-negotiate the Americans. They'll maybe sign some kind of partial agreement that will simply offset by a short time their nuclear program. And from Israel's point of view, the regime in Tehran having a nuclear arsenal is an existential threat. It's a bigger threat to Israel than to other countries because Israel is so small. A single small strike by any nuclear power, Iran or anywhere else, it's not clear that Israel will survive such a strike. So Israel is disappointed, I think, a little bit in that Donald Trump, on the one hand, he's been quite firm in saying that the Americans will not allow the Islamic regime to have a nuclear weapon. On the other hand, he's kind of giving mixed signals as well, that he wants an agreement for the sake of an agreement, rather than a real lasting agreement that for once and for all will prevent this regime in Tehran building a nuclear arsenal.
So with shifting global alliances and increased Russian and Chinese involvement in Middle Eastern affairs, how might external powers shape or complicate the outcome of these talks?
Well, I mean, America's in a big bind because it very much wants to exit the Middle East. It doesn't want to be particularly involved in foreign affairs to the extent it was in general under the so-called America First Trump presidency. And to the extent that the president wants to deal with foreign affairs, it's very much about China, less about Russia, less about the Middle East. But the US can't ignore the Middle East. ISIS, although it's been badly battered, still exists in Syria. And the Iranian regime has not necessarily finished with America. From the regime's point of view, they still chant death to America, down to America every Friday. And they see themselves as a kind of on a historic battle against the West. So the West may want to ignore this radical regime, but the regime won't let it.
Mr. Gross, it was great having you on the program. Thanks for joining us here on A News.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm joined by Anna Evans, a geopolitical analyst who is joining us from Lisbon. Ms. Evans, first of all, thank you for joining us on A News.
Thank you for having me.
Ms. Evans, what do you think is different about this round of negotiations between the United States and Iran compared to past efforts like the JCPOA? Is there genuine political will on either side to strike a new deal?
Well, it looks like both sides are very much concerned with striking a deal at this point. Also, the geopolitical situation is fairly different. This is a historical moment in the sense that we actually have indirect negotiations. Of course, they are mediated by Oman and they are being held in a third country, Rome. But the geopolitical situation is very advantageous to these negotiations. First of all, because Iran has lost its frontline boots in the Middle East. So Hezbollah has been pretty much dismantled in its operational capacity. Same thing with Hamas. And the Houthis in Yemen are also facing a lot of attacks and also decreased capacity. So basically, those forces that Iran used at the front end of its Middle East influence, at the very end of its far-stretching influence and attempt over Israel, are pretty much dismantled. Secondly, Israel demonstrated in October that it is able to fly over Tehran, over the whole territory of Iran with a set of airplanes without any casualty. So that was also kind of a maximum pressure on Tehran. And then Donald Trump won the elections, and Donald Trump wants to get out of the Middle East and of Ukraine. And so it is really important for Donald Trump to concentrate the administration's military and economic industrial energy both at the domestic level and with the Indo-Pacific. So there's a lot of interest domestically in the US to deal with this. Furthermore, the government of Iran is also under social pressure because we know that since the hijab social unrest, and the problems of inflation, which has reached very high levels, over 30%, and the problems of the devaluation of the currency and the inability to trade and the maximum sanctions by the United States, all this creates a very high pressure domestically over Iran. And so both in its foreign activities and sphere of influence and in its domestic standing, the Iranian government has a very keen interest in negotiating something. Also, we should take into account that the pre-negotiations which happened in Russia, Witkoff traveled to Russia previously, are also very important, because if a deal is reached, one needs to understand how the monitoring of the program of uranium enriching will be done, and whether Russia will play an important part in that post-deal monitoring and guarding the program. And so it's a very, very different context. And this is again part of also the negotiations between the US and Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine, because any benefits that Russia can get in the Middle East will of course be translated into lower territorial concessions from Ukraine in case there is a peace deal. So geopolitically, this is all quite interlinked and in a very good way. And of course, we also had the visit by Saudi Arabia, which was a historical one, and which also signaled that there is an interest overall in the Middle East to have these negotiations fare well, because if they don't succeed, nobody really wants war in the Middle East, and nobody wants war in the Persian Gulf. So I think we're at a very good trajectory to expect something out of this.
Ms. Evans, many thanks for your valuable time and perspective. It has been a pleasure having you on A News. The United States will walk away from efforts to broker a Russia-Ukraine peace deal unless there are clear signs of progress soon, U.S. President Donald Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Friday. President Trump stated that the United States would take a pass on trying to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war if either Russia or Ukraine makes it excessively difficult to bring the conflict to an end. While signaling frustration over the stalled progress, Trump stopped short of saying that the United States was entirely stepping back from negotiations. He emphasized that he still believes that there is a strong possibility to end the conflict, suggesting that developments on the ground may soon bring the situation to a critical turning point.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass. But hopefully we won't have to do that. No, Marco is right in saying it. We want to see it end.
Do you think Russia's playing you?
No, nobody's playing me. I'm trying to help. This was Biden's war, by the way. By me getting involved, they'll say, "Oh, Trump." This is not Trump's war. This is Biden. This is a war that should have never happened.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said there had already been some progress made toward a peace settlement in Ukraine. However, he acknowledged that contacts with Washington continued to be difficult. Peskov emphasized that Russia was striving to resolve the conflict, but only while safeguarding its own national interest. He reiterated that Moscow remained open to dialogue with the United States. Thursday's meeting in Paris marked the first substantial high-level in-person talks involving European powers around President Trump's proposed peace initiative. President Zelensky's office described the talks as constructive and positive.
But we're not going to continue with this endeavor for weeks and months on end. So we needed to...
In our previous bulletin talk show, Katie Wilson discussed the issues surrounding Washington's signaling of urgency in the Russia-Ukraine peace deal negotiations with Professor of Politics at Kiev University, Alexei Haran. He explained us which side of the war needs to be under pressure in order to achieve a stable ceasefire deal.
You will not reach a ceasefire or stable agreement, stable peace, if there's no pressure on Russia. Okay, so far Trump was pressing Ukraine to accept conditions. Okay, we accept American conditions for full ceasefire. What Russia said no. And after that, there was no pressure on Russia at all. We don't know what's going behind the scene, but the signs actually clearly shows that the United States are not going. Well, actually, we are not pressing Russia in the right direction. So this is not negotiations from the position of force. Vice versa, this is invitation for Russia to steal what Russia gained during the aggression. So I think this is not a good position, for the country which pretends to be a mediator and which was an ally of Ukraine, actually. So now what could happen if United States withdraw from negotiation process? The problem is what they will do next. Whether they are going to continue to support Ukraine or not, and whether they are going to press Russia as an aggression. These are huge questions. And unfortunately, I am not very optimistic at this point. So my feeling is that if America will go from negotiations, it actually will show that there's no clear will from the President Trump to stop this war. Again, if you want to stop this war, you need to pressure Russia.
The United States and Ukraine have signed a memorandum of intent on jointly exploiting Ukrainian mineral resources. According to the text, both sides aim to finalize the deal on April 26. Washington has earlier signaled that it expects to have privileged access to Ukraine's natural resources as repayment for U.S. military support for the country over the past 3 years.
Ukraine and the United States have taken an important step toward the country's economic recovery and development. On April 17th, they signed a memorandum of intent that paves the way for an economic partnership and the creation of an investment fund for Ukraine. Ukraine's first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy, Yulia Sviridenko, shared the news on social media. She said the document is vital for rebuilding infrastructure, supporting businesses and creating new economic opportunities. Sviridenko also highlighted the US support for Ukraine's independence and security. She noted that the American people are ready to invest in Ukraine's recovery. The memorandum also draws attention to Ukraine's rich natural resources, especially critical minerals like lithium, titanium and uranium. These are in high demand in Europe and the US. The US aims to secure access to these resources, especially during the ongoing war. US President Donald Trump emphasized his special interest in Ukraine's natural resources, stating that gaining greater access to these resources is important for overcoming the crisis caused by the war.
I'm dealing with President Zelensky. I'm dealing with President Putin. I'm trying to get the money back or secured because, Europe has given $100 billion. The United States has given $350 billion because we had a stupid, incompetent president and administration. 350. But here's worse. Europe gave it in the form of a loan. They get their money back. We gave it in the form of nothing, so I want them to give us something for all of the money that we put up.
First of all, our knowledge base on the Ukrainian resources, rare earths, titanium, manganese, and others, is not sufficient. So we need more information about the commodities which are located in Ukraine. First. Second, a huge problem for the US is that there are not so many American companies who are able to mine and to process these rare earth elements, because since almost 2 decades, Chinese companies dominate this sector. So it's easy to say on a political level, let's get these critical elements from Ukraine. But on a practical level, it's not so far clear which companies, Americans, British or German or whatever companies, will be able to do this right now when the war continues.
This agreement holds great importance for both Ukraine and the US economically and geopolitically. The use of Ukraine's natural resources is a strategic issue for Western countries. The memorandum goes beyond economic cooperation. It is also a key step towards supporting Ukraine's independence, security and future development.
Germany, the largest economy in Europe, could face up to 290 billion euro losses by 2028 as a result of the new US trade restrictions. These estimated losses could increase further if the trade war between Washington and Beijing persists.
Germany could face up to 290 billion euros in economic losses by 2028. The reason? Donald Trump's new tariff policy. According to a study by the Cologne-based German Economic Institute, the trade restrictions imposed by Trump could reduce Germany's GDP by around 1.6% annually. If US-China tensions escalate further, the economic blow could be even greater. The total losses for the European Union are projected to reach up to 1.1 trillion euros between 2025 and 2028. The study also notes that developing economies will be hit even harder, with some countries potentially facing a complete halt in economic growth. On April 2nd, Trump announced sweeping new import tariffs on the United States' key trade partners, declaring the day Liberation Day. Under the new policy, products from the European Union will face a 20% tariff, Chinese goods 34%, and Vietnamese imports 46%. Trump's move has caused serious concerns in global markets, with experts warning that long-term disruption to international trade is inevitable.
US airstrikes on Yemen's Ras Issa oil port has killed 74 people and injured more than 100 others, according to Houthi-run media. The United States Central Command confirmed the strike, saying it targeted a key fuel supply point for the Iran-backed militants. The attack aimed to weaken the Houthis by cutting off a major source of illicit revenue, which is funding their operations. Meanwhile, Israel says the Houthis later launched a missile towards Tel Aviv, which was intercepted. Tensions are rising in Serbia as students rally behind the chair of Belgrade University, who is now facing charges for supporting the protest. The controversy has added fuel to an already heated political climate. Vladan Djokic, who denies the charges, is accused of abuse of office after backing student-led protests that erupted following a deadly roof collapse in Novi Sad last year. The incident killed 16 and sparked daily rallies, the biggest challenge to President Alexander Vučić in years. Vučić and other high-ranking officials have accused the Western nations of fueling the unrest to destabilize Serbia. Thousands of Orthodox Christians gathered in Jerusalem for the Holy Fire ceremony, one of the most sacred rituals leading up to Easter.
Thousands of worshippers gathered on Saturday to celebrate the Holy Fire ceremony in Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, believed to be the burial site of Jesus Christ. The ritual, which takes place every Holy Saturday, draws pilgrims from around the world. According to tradition, at exactly 2 p.m. local time, a sunbeam enters through the church's ceiling and lights a lamp placed in the tomb. After hours of waiting, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch emerged from the sealed tomb with a candle said to be lit by the holy fire. The flame quickly spread from hand to hand, filling the church with flickering light and chants, and then extended to worshippers standing in the narrow streets nearby. Located in the Christian quarter of East Jerusalem's Old City, the church remains a sacred place for many. Notably this year, Easter is celebrated on the same day, April 20th, by both Catholic and Orthodox Christians, a rare coincidence as the two usually mark it weeks apart.
A 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck the Afghanistan-Tajikistan border in the morning hours of April 19th. According to the German Research Center for Geosciences, the earthquake's epicenter was recorded at a depth of 92 kilometers. Although the event was felt across a wide area, no immediate reports of casualties or infrastructure damage have been received. Based on the magnitude and the vulnerability of the affected population, the humanitarian impact is expected to be low. The earthquake's effects were also felt in parts of Pakistan and northern India, but no significant casualties or property damage have been reported from these areas either. The Russian Supreme Court has removed the Taliban from the list of designated terrorist organizations. Moscow and Kabul have hailed the decision as a historical milestone. Tamim Bahis reports from Kabul.
The Russian Supreme Court has officially removed the Taliban from its list of banned terrorist organizations, a designation that had been in place for over 2 decades. The decision, initiated by the request from the Prosecutor General, marks a significant step towards normalizing relations with Afghanistan's de facto authorities. Russia's position on the Taliban has changed considerably over time. In the 1990s, following the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, Moscow regarded the Taliban as a serious threat and supported the anti-Taliban Northern Alliance. In 2003, Russia officially designated the Taliban as a terrorist organization, reflecting deep-rooted hostility and suspicion. However, beginning in the 2010s, Russia adopted a more pragmatic approach, initiating dialogue with the Taliban as concerns grew over the rise of ISIS in Afghanistan. This shift became more visible during the Doha peace process, when Russia hosted Taliban delegations in Moscow in 2019 and 2021, alongside other Afghan political figures to discuss the country's future. Although Russia has not formally recognized the Taliban government, it has kept its embassy in Kabul operational since the group regained power in 2021. Russia's main interests remain focused on regional security, preventing the spread of extremism into Central Asia and preserving a strategic influence amid the retreat of Western powers. Dmitry Zhirnov, Russia's ambassador to Afghanistan, formally informed the acting foreign minister Amir Khan Muttaqi of the Taliban's removal from the list of banned organizations. Both sides described the move as a historic step towards strengthening political and economic cooperation between Moscow and Kabul. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
The Istanbul Digital Art Festival is making international headlines once again. With the support of Turkey's Ministry of Culture and Tourism, the festival held an exclusive international preview in Paris ahead of its highly anticipated 5th edition this June. The event brought together influential figures from the worlds of diplomacy and art, offering a glimpse into how artificial intelligence is reshaping the future of creativity. The international preview of the Istanbul Digital Art Festival was hosted at the Culture Center of the Azerbaijan Embassy in Paris. The event attracted over 200 attendees, including diplomats, artists, and cultural leaders from both Turkey and France. One of the evening's major highlights was the unveiling of Memory of Anatolia, an AI-powered digital artwork developed by Turkish art studio OJ. This immersive piece was created using millions of photographs from the Anadolu Agency's archives. It offers a unique portrayal of Turkey's social, cultural, and political history through the lens of machine learning, transforming decades of archival visuals into dynamic digital storytelling. Organizers explained that Memory of Anatolia is a reflection of the fusion between data, heritage, and artistic expression, creating a powerful and emotional experience that reimagines history through the eyes of artificial intelligence. The event also featured a captivating solo exhibition by Shusha, Azerbaijan's first AI artist. Shusha's live performance added a distinctive layer to the evening, further highlighting the growing global influence of artificial intelligence in the world of contemporary art. Azerbaijan's ambassador to France, Leyla Abdullayeva, shared her enthusiasm about the occasion. She noted that this marked the first time their cultural center had hosted a digital art exhibition and expressed hope that the festival would continue to foster global connections between artists and audiences, showcasing the transformative power of digital creativity. That's all we have for now. Thank you for tuning in and keep watching A News.